Hi there, how's everybody doing? This is Sergio Sais with the Real Estate Hedgehog podcast number 48. It's been a couple of weeks since we been out here with you guys, but as usual, I've got my partner Sam with us. Sam, how's everything going, buddy?
Same old stuff, busy, keeping up with the rentals and just learning as I'm going all the time.
Excellent. Yeah, no, same here. Before we came on online here, Sam and I were talking about some properties out in Indiana. We're waiting to see how much rents, a couple of duplexes that we're looking at. So always something going, always got to be checking up on what's available out there. And yes, we are kind of like, we're holding steady because we want to see what property values are going to be at maybe sometime during the second quarter of this year, maybe even third quarter, but it doesn't mean that we're not looking, and we still are. So for today's topic, we have a really cool topic that Sam and I want to talk about. You know what? In prior videos or podcasts, we've talked about a lot of things that we do when you're going to buy a property. We talk about finding the property, looking for it, how to value it, how to figure out what we're going to be paying for it. We do the negotiation. We've talked about that. We've also talked about doing due diligence. So there's a lot of stuff that happens prior to actually closing on a deal. And today, what we'd like to do is talk about what happens on day one when you close your deal. So all the stuff has been going down. Your lender calls you and he says, Sam, got some good news for you, buddy. See, today is Wednesday. On Monday, we're going to close. So I'll need you to be there to sign papers and everything. And so now you know when you're going to close. So you start getting your process, and you should have a system in place where you can follow the same process, the same procedure every time. That'll help you to make sure that you're, and I'm not talking about when you actually sign, but I'm talking about when you're going out there to the property for the first time as the actual owner. So Sam has a lot of experience doing this kind of stuff, and he's got a really cool system for doing this and what he does on day one. So Sam, tell us a little bit about probably maybe one of your more recent properties that you've closed on. And I also know that people call you all the time and ask you, what do you do now? I'm going to close. What do I do now? What do you usually tell people, and what have you done on day one?
Okay, so I think I don't want to take away from the people who are there. They're about to hit day one. There's an excitement, right? Your heart's palpitating, you're sweating, you're anxious, you're happy, you're excited because you're gonna get this property. It's really gonna happen. So I've been there many times, and I never really lose that feeling. But over time, like you said, you evolve, we learn, and I have come up with a system and a process, and it's always being refined. So like you had mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background, but day one, what do you do? And you usually have forewarning on it. And that is more than enough time to set something up. So here's what I do. And I'll give you two examples, what I did before and what I do now.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So before I buy this house, it's going to be a rental, empty or not. I'm excited. Day one, I get the call, hey, we're closed. I'm like, great. I don't know what to do. I'm not prepared. I'm not sure if I should go knock on the door and introduce myself. I don't know what to do, right? Especially when it's an inherited tenant. It's one thing when it's an empty house. You're excited. You go in, you can clean up, you can, take photos and romp around on the floor. But it's another thing when you bought a place that's already occupied.
Right.
That's what you got to prepare for. And as time goes on, oftentimes that's what you end up with when you're buying an investment property versus a personal property.
Right. So I know what you're talking about, that excitement, because on the one side, you're excited about this new property. On the other hand, you're thinking, oh, I just signed on a mortgage payment, or not a payment, but on a mortgage loan. It could be 5, 6, 800,000, 1.2, 1.3 million. You've inherited, or you've incurred a lot of risk. So you got to make sure that you set things up so that you never default on something like that. So what do you do? What's that?
So here's what I do, and here's what I suggest people do, and take it as a word of advice. Have a set system in place on documentation. Administrative stuff is key. to running every business because it standardizes rules and ways of operation. So what I do is when I know that it's going to come to a close, I've already prepared myself, and I have templates now, but if you don't, create one.
Yeah.
You know you've got the original leases because you had to review it before you close on the place. It was during your due diligence. So that means you have all the current tenants' information already in place, what their lease looks like. What I did once I got into the standardized operation was I used to do an amendment to their lease. It's a one-page amendment that kind of confirms their lease and when it started, letting them know who the new owner is, any changes I'm going to make. Let's say, for example, I'm going to raise their rents in the next 60 days or so, and then where to pay their rent to now. That's pretty good. It's simple, it's easy. But over time, I have evolved to going a little further. So what I do now, and I'll tell you about the property I just closed on a few months back.
Okay.
So it's 16 units. I've got 16 tenants already in place. I know that it's going to close on, let's say, that Monday. So the few days before that, I prepare all new leases using their information. And it's leases that I have standardized to the way I want it, my terms. I may or may not continue some of their terms, but these are on my terms because I just want the viewers to remember this part. The lease that they had was between them and the previous owner. It's not between them and you. In a goodwill gesture and for your own sanity, you're not going to go out and evict everybody, or you shouldn't. You want to take some of that and maybe make it so that they would still like to live with you or, rent from you, but your lease has to protect you. That previous owner might have had an old lease or only cared for so much risk, but you want to protect yourself. So your lease should cover all these things that have come up with the rules and the changes in the county and the state and the city. All that's incorporated in the leases, right? So that's what I pre-do. So on day one, when it closes, the moment I get that call, hey, it's recorded, I'm ready to go. Everything's already pre-packaged. I drive my butt over there, and this, if it's in driving range. If not, I've actually emailed this stuff to the property managers out wherever they are.
Right.
I knock on every door. I meet with every tenant. I let them know ahead of time, usually within a week or so before. I either call the property manager, let them know I'm coming so that I can meet every tenant one time, the first time. Or I've called the tenant ahead of time as well if it's just by myself and there's no property manager, because remember, you have all their information, and you should. If you don't, you should.
Right.
Let them know what day I'm coming because I anticipate the closing. Sit them down, go through the lease, tell them what the current terms are, and let them know if there is a rent raise or not. If they protest or you sense a level of anxiety or perhaps disagreement, this is how I kind of not smooth it over, but bring some calm and cool collectiveness back into the room. I remind them of their last lease with the last landlord. I let them know that I am the new landlord. These are the terms. However, any major changes in the lease, for example, a rent increase, a deposit increase, it won't take effect for at least 60 days. It gives them time to think about it. So I let them know that. I let them know that they don't have to sign this document immediately. I would like them to, because we're talking about it. But if they should not want to, I give them usually up to 48 hours. I expect it to be signed within 48 hours. I let them know that if they don't agree with it, I ask that they give me the courtesy, just like I'm giving them the courtesy, of a 30-day notice of when they're going to leave so I can get my crew prepared to come and rehab for the next tenant. Usually when you let them know that, they understand where everything is sitting, where everything settles, and where they're going to end up in this picture if they don't want to continue renting.
Right. And they know this is for real at that
correct
point, right?
And I'm not saying other property managers don't do that. I'm just saying this is how I do it. This is how I've run it. And it's a standardized thing. All the leases are the same, so I know every item on the lease because I created it. It's simple. When somebody violates something or they have a question, I know the answer to it, versus I have to study every individual lease from previous landlords. That doesn't work.
Yeah, no. Excellent. So you go in there, you have them, you have the lease with you, you actually sit with them and go over every item so they understand. I suspect you have them initial pages and stuff.
Correct.
Like that, right? Excellent. Very good. So they go through that. And then, so almost always, I know that, you and I talk about business a lot. Almost always you go in there with the intention of increasing the rents, because
Yes.
otherwise, why would you buy the property, right?
Yeah.
Because the increase in the rent is that value added part of it. So why is it important, if you could tell our audience, why it's important that you do raise rent? What is it that, I mean, obviously you're going to make a little bit more money just because from the cash flow, but what's the real importance of increasing those rents?
So, when it comes to making this a business, every business is valued by its net operating income, the gross minus the operations, the net operating income, right? Every business, it doesn't matter what type of business it is. It can be a 99-cent store business. It could be Ralph's, Vaughn's, Stater Brothers, a rental business. That's how things are valued. You want your asset to be more valuable, and you want to be able to have some control over its value. One of the biggest control you have over the value is raising the rents. And why that's very important is a few things. Oftentimes we go and buy undervalued products because people have neglected to keep the rent at market value. So there's room to raise rent. That's one. But two, oftentimes when we go and we make this purchase, it may or may not be the ideal return on day one close of escrow. It's an acceptable return, but not the ideal return. And to get to the ideal return, we have to raise rents. And in raising rents, you raise the value. And if you are ever in that position where you just wanted to grab this deal to get it under your belt and you were accepting to a higher interest rate loan and you need to refinance, remember, the lending institution looks at everything that you do in your operation, specifically what are the gross rents? Can it support a refinance? And so you have to always look ahead of what you want to do. You're not going to be able to predictably get a good refinance situation if you don't raise rents, because remember, you started right here. Whatever your rent is, this is where you are on day one. If you make no changes or deviations to what you close on day one, the current situation of the economy and loan barely got you there that day. Should it go up or down, you have no control. You've lost control. If the economy slumped 2-3 years from now, you need to refinance. Well, you didn't do anything to help yourself. You only hurt yourself. So if the economy slumps and it costs more money to borrow, you will not get the loan. But if you raise rents, then you prepared for that day when it comes. If it never comes, that's even better. You're over prepared. So that's what you want to do, and that's why I do it.
So this is very important, what Sam just said. I hope you guys kind of caught that, because what he's really talking about, obviously, if you get, the right property where the rents are where you need them to be, you get the loan exactly, the rates exactly where you need them to be, everything's cool. You may not raise rents for a while, or if you do, you might raise it just a little bit. But if you have to, as Sam said, what if you really want to get that property because it really fits your, as we like to say, the buy box that we've established, it really fits there, but for whatever reason, you can't quite make you can't get the lender to give you the money, so you have to go and get what we call a bridge loan, something to get you into the property. And you could go to a hard money lender, you could use a HELOC. A lot of people will do that. They'll borrow that money just for that period of time, maybe 6, 7, 8 months, maybe a year, depending on what you've set up. By increasing the rents, you've increased the value of the property. And that's a whole other discussion that we can have involving cap rates and everything. But you've increased the value. So if you bought it, let's say at $800,000, you've increased rents. And now because of what you've done and the cap rate and everything, now it might be worth, let's say, 1.1 mil. Okay, increased it by maybe $200,000 to $300,000. When you take that to the bank, that's what the bank's going to look at, right?
Exactly. So to your point, someone had asked me this question today. Talking about these high interest rate short-term loans. So sometimes you have to have that just to get in, especially if you're a beginner. But you don't want to stay in that because it's not good. It's not healthy for your business.
Right.
This is what you want to do. Standardize that rent. Have your plan. Raise the rent. So what happens is when you give these tenants a 60 or so day notice to raise rents, they're going to either tell you they're going to accept it or not accept it. So you are now better prepared. You have an idea of where we're going in 60 days. You can forecast it. What I would do is on that 60th day, when the rent is due at the new rate, see if it comes in, if they're going to pay their rent. If they keep up their end of the bargain, now you know that it's in effect. You have a higher rent. So now, just after 60 days, you've got an existing effective higher rent lease that you can take to a lender, refinance, because you're proving to them that here is the new rents, here are the values, I'd like to go ahead and refinance to a lower rate. This way, it cuts down on time. It cuts down on hold time at high interest debt, right? A HELOC, a bridge loan, oftentimes they're between 6 and 10% or more. And if you're only making 4, 5, 6% on your money on day one, you may be making zero or you're taking a slight loss. But by doing this, you've overcome it to refinance it because you've created equity that allows you to do the 80-20 or 70-30 ratio loans.
Excellent. So again, let me just go back to the very beginning where you said you have a system in place, where you know exactly what you're going to do on day one. You've got your lease agreements. The terms are your terms because you've developed that lease agreement. So any questions that come up, you know right away. You can answer the questions immediately.
Yeah.
The tenants either sign or they don't. If they choose not to sign, you know that they're going to have to move out. And at that point, you rehab the property if it needs to. And now obviously it makes it easier to raise the rents for
the market rents.
For the market. You take it right to market rent. You don't have to creep it up with a current tenant. You just boom, let's say.
And I have done that and it's worked phenomenally. When people don't agree, I'm more than happy with that. And I usually end up bumping it up $500-600 immediately to the new tenant.
Right. And you just take it right to market rent, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And you're sitting pretty. That's great. Excellent. Well, I hope people have taken note of a lot of this information. This is great information. I want to touch real quickly. I mentioned HELOCs, and you talked a little bit about it. I know that a lot of people think about, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a HELOC out of my own personal home and use that to invest on the property. What I've done is I've actually done a variation of that where I've actually just refinanced my property over the last year or two. But I was able to do that because interest rates were so low. You know, I mean, I was getting refis at about 3.4, 3.5. I know people have done even lower than that. So that makes sense to just incur that debt because it's basically free money that they're giving you. And because of where I was before, actually, my mortgage payment, I think, went up like $50 or $60 to take out $100,000. With a HELOC, it's a little different because HELOCs are they go with whatever the market rate is on interest rates.
Yeah, so generally that's what they do.
And you have to be a little bit careful and that's why you want to be able to get out of something like that as quickly as possible, not more than a year into it, so that you can replace it with a regular 25, 30-year loan, a fully amortized loan.
Oh yeah, I mean, to make it simple, think of it this way. Whatever rate your HELOC is, if that's your down payment, that's your entire down payment, whatever rate your HELOC is, you take that plus the rate you're going to get on the remaining loan, divided by 2. That's your real rate because you've now got a blended rate. And if your return is at or below the blended rate, you're not making money. Remember that because you're paying back the HELOC and the loan. So if your cash flow rate is at or below the blended rate, you're making zero. It has to be more. And if you've calculated more based on your purchase price and negotiation, then that bit more, whether it's be 1, 2, 3% more, that's your profit margin. So you're looking to see if you have a HELOC that's set at 6% because the prime is 5.5 and you're negotiated a half plus prime, you're at 6. And your rate on your investment loan itself is at 7. So you're really paying 6.5 for the whole thing. Then if your returns are 7 or 8, then you're making about 1.5%. But if your returns are 5% cash on cash, then you're losing money. So these are things you got to think about. So you got to get out of it quick. raise the rents, standardize your leases, because when you go to a financial institution, they're going to look at you, not just the property itself, but your standardized systems and your operations. It gives them faith that you are a low risk investment for them. So remember that too.
Excellent. You know what? Great information. I'm so glad we talked about this, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there that have those type of questions. What do we do on day one? What do I have to have in place? And what happens if I've used a bridge loan or a HELOC or something? Bridge loans can be fairly expensive, you know, 9, 10, 12%. So, but you're using it just to get in, or and the same thing with the HELOC. So all those things have been discussed today. Great information. Any final words for our audience out there, Sam?
Well, you know, one last tidbit on the stuff you do on day one. I always add to the lease because it's a risk management system. So I add a crime and drug addendum, basically just saying there's no crime or drugs allowed here, right? I add what's called a satellite addendum, which basically means that any damage to the property based on them trying to put in a satellite TV or internet, they're going to be responsible for. And here in California, you have to give them the rent control addendum to let them know whether this property is exempt from rent control or not. But what that does is it adds the pressure for them to stay in line, because now they know that it's in writing. There's no leeway. Leeway is only if you choose to, but if they deviate, commit a crime, cause a nuisance, the police is called, it's grounds for you to terminate the lease and release them from your property. And that's really, I mean, that's really your only insurance, because at the end of the day, you don't really have as much control as you think if a tenant really wants to ruin your day, right? But these are the ways that you can protect yourself. In any case, if you want to learn more, hit us up, send us an email, realestatehedgehog@gmail.com. I'll put the link here in our description, and make sure you like and subscribe. You know, I mean, we do this on our own time. It's free. We hope that we can provide this knowledge and impart this wisdom to folks who are getting into the game, and cut down the learning curve. That's really what it's about.